Good afternoon. Welcome. Welcome everybody to the Innovation Partners in Building, to UConn, to the second cohort of the Future and Climate Venture Studio. We are very excited to have the companies coming back to meet and interact with our UConn faculty and us on the journey they had in the past 2 months working with UConn and RGA on their technologies and business. I wanted to start by reminding everybody how important the climate change is to our society and to the world the way we know it today. The fifth national assessment came out on Tuesday, and it wasn't looking good. Actually, we see that the human-induced climate change is creating a significant impact to all the aspects of our society. I mean, we can see there was a map there with precipitation to floods to sea level rise, heat waves. All of those are so positive, going up across the United States. And I'm sure the report, if there was a global report, we will see similar things across the globe. So the climate change is increasing the risks to our society, our economy, our health. At the same time, the solutions that we or the businesses, the academia will bring to fight that risk or to improve resilience or adapt or to mitigate that risk, to me is an opportunity. It is an opportunity to have new directions in what we do, to innovate. I believe that the next decade will be the decade of our economy. The next decade will be the economy of artificial intelligence on one hand, but of climate and of course the clean energy and decarbonization that will fight climate change on the other. So these are the two major, in my opinion, areas of our next decade. And this group here, is very relevant to what the future is. I would like to say that this partnership we have with RGA on the Future Climate Venture Studio is one of our examples of the many and different initiatives the university is taking under our president's leadership in this field, in climate and clean energy, because we want to become the leaders globally in innovation, research, and education in this field. So with no further ado, I wanted to thank again our cohort, the companies. You are actually, we value your business because we think that your business in this area meshes very well with what our goals are on sustainability and climate. And with that, I would like to invite our panelists for our next session, Radenka, Steve, and Dan.
Thanks, Manos. Welcome, everyone. Pleasure to be here today and an honor to have these folks here. I'm going to do quick bios for folks who are watching remotely, not here in the room. I think everyone here in the room probably doesn't need introductions, but others might. So President Merrick leads Connecticut's $1.5 billion public flagship university with 5 campuses, more than 30,000 students, and an extensive network of research and service endeavors, including UConn Health. President Merrick is known worldwide for her work on catalytic applications in fuel cells, batteries, and sensors, and throughout her career has received numerous awards, truly numerous awards for innovation and leadership in Japan, Canada, and the US. Thank you for making the time. You've been a great supporter of the program since the very beginning. And Dan, thank you also for making the time. Dan serves as the state of Connecticut's first Chief Innovation Officer, and just the other day was nominated to be Commissioner of DECD. In this role, he serves as an advocate for the innovation economy throughout Connecticut, focusing on economic growth, workforce development, and job creation. Prior to entering public service, Dan was a tech investor for 25 years, investing in high-growth, innovative companies in software, consumer, and fintech that went on to create tens of thousands of jobs. So thank you for making the time in your incredibly busy schedule. If there are other appointments you'd like to announce today, I'd be happy to. All right, so Dan, since you're a guest on campus today, we'll start with you. The Hartford Business Journal mentioned that you had considered taking a position with the federal government, but that Governor Lamont convinced you to stay here in Connecticut. So just curious on your take on what the opportunity is in Connecticut, what you want to prioritize, how you see the role of the state versus the role of federal government in innovation and entrepreneurialism.
Happy to. And first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you, Radenka, for our continued partnership. It's my first time on the UConn campus. It's absolutely incredible to see it. So glad I got to spend the day here. So the story is correct. I started this journey, as they say, because I was talking about a potential federal appointment. As part of that process, I met with the governor, honestly and candidly, just to get his advice. And it was really advice around this particular potential appointment. And he said to me, he said, look, if you really care about this, and this we were talking about was impact. I was talking about how I had 25 years in the private sector. I'm viewing this as 25 years in the public sector, God willing, with a truly long-term view of how to make the most impact. He said, if you really care about that, don't go federal. Everyone does, because that's where the headlines happen, and you're going to get frustrated, things are going to move incredibly slowly, and you're going to come back to me anyway. So skip that step and just meet my team. And so I did meet his team. I found his team, by the way, now my team too, to be incredibly strong, people that I felt like I could really work with. And we ultimately settled in on this newly created position. I did call him back and I said, I don't see a position that makes sense given my background. He said, oh, no, we'll create it. And so in partnership with Commissioner Dom, the current Commissioner of Economic and Community Development, we created this position, Chief Innovation Officer. And the message we really wanted to send, and we take this quite seriously, is the innovation economy is something as an administration we want to prioritize. We do have an Office of Manufacturing, led by a Chief Manufacturing Officer, who was incredible, by the way, Paul Lavoie. And we want to send that same message about the growth industries. By the way, with this new appointment as Commissioner of the DECD, I will be retaining that title. I don't want to send the message that this matters to us and then 4 months later say, just kidding. But I would love to find a successor. So if anyone's in the room is interested, please come talk to me. In terms of what I saw in the state of Connecticut, why I got excited about this, and I have this thesis that I've been talking about. And the thesis is that the pandemic rewrote the rules. None of us went around hoping for a global pandemic. But coming out of it, as a society, we got kind of retrained that there's more flexibility in terms of where one might choose to live. The geographic relationship between employer and employee is evolving. I don't think it goes away. But if you're no longer required to come into a concrete block 5 days a week, you have more flexibility about where you choose to live. Why not choose to live in a place where the quality of life is high, where the quality of education is incredibly high, where it's a great place to raise your family? All the reasons why, frankly, my wife and I chose to move here in 2011. And we're seeing it. So this isn't just a thesis. So if you look at our GDP growth last year, we grew 7th fastest in the country. That's faster than any other state in the region, not to pick on other states, but that's outsized. It's faster than the country as a whole. We haven't been in the top 10 since 2004. So that's a big deal. Second thing is population trends. We're seeing people move here. So the last 2 years, our population has gone up. Every other state in the region it's going down. They're losing people. And by the way, we're gaining people from places like Massachusetts and New Jersey and Illinois and New York. And again, not to harp on any other state, but I think what's happening is the decision of where to live is democratizing. It's becoming more individually driven, and people are voting with their feet and their wallet to move here. Last point, I know I'm going on too long. What I'm seeing is also renewed energy. Now, I still get a fair amount of skepticism as I travel around the state. And so the speech I'm trying to give is one about optimism. Let's ditch that skepticism, even though I know why it exists, and let's seize upon this moment with all of this energy, this influx of energy, this influx of people, and start to really make sure that we're prioritizing and catalyzing this kind of growth. And I will tell you that the governor and this administration is deeply aligned around this. We all recognize that this is our moment, and we do intend to capitalize on it.
Thanks. Let's think about that at the university level. Like before you were named interim president and then president, you served as the vice president of research, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And the university has many innovation initiatives, TCS, TIP, CCEI, Hillside. So can you tell us what you think the role of a university is in innovation and entrepreneurship, and how UConn's approach is unique, and how you'd like to see it evolve?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Before I answer your question, I want to welcome everybody who is in this room. I want to thank business people who are here, who want to spend time to learn what is new. I want to thank Dan for taking these challenging 2 roles, not only one. I'm in his camp about optimism. I'm very optimistic about innovation, Connecticut and UConn in general. I think we live in fabulous state. We are not only geographic point between New York and Boston. I want to talk more what happened in this state. We are making documentary about innovation in Connecticut at UConn. And the reason that I came to UConn in 2010, the Governor Malloy was looking for 10 experts in the world in the clean energy. And I knew that Connecticut has a history, tradition, manufacturing capacities, innovative capacity to move forward. So I like to tell the story as a president, and I'd ask people, what do you know about innovation, clean energy in Connecticut? What do you know about UConn? And people say, Husky. I said, what else? They are silent. So I said, we failed to tell the story. And before I said what we are doing, I think the most important is to celebrate history, tradition, and knowledge that you have. So in 1969, we worked with the Hamilton standards to put the man on the moon. So we have Apollo space shuttle and fuel cells that were developed with faculty from mechanical engineering, thermodynamics, who taught how to make those, to provide electricity and water for the crews. UConn faculty, if you go to archives and look, the first solar panels on the White House had been put by UConn faculty. How many in this room know this fact? Okay. This is that's where is the problem. We've done it, but nobody knows. So then we have easy job to do. So when it comes, science and innovation make a breakthroughs. And that is where university is instrumental, to make these breakthroughs and to push forward. We have to communicate, we have to educate, we have to innovate, we have to bring people who can invest in our students, in the startup, like Steve, you and your team, together with JIT, you saw potential that you can have. And I want also to emphasize how important was a state investment that you are sitting in this room, because this will not happen without big vision. There is over 80 million in equipment, and there is no company that will these days invest 80 million in equipment to be able to diagnose and tell you how things work. 80% of Connecticut economy is small and medium-sized companies. They are short on people, they're short on equipment, and they need to advance their product. So the role of university is helping economy as a state land grant, educating workforce, innovate, and be entrepreneurial. And entrepreneurial in today's world is a must. And that's what we want to achieve. And that's when I became Vice President for Research. It was Vice President for Research, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship. This is what we are teaching our students, because we have to bring innovation for the public benefit.
That's great. Radenka just touched on kind of the ecosystems, small companies and others. So we have many great partners in this program from throughout the ecosystem: Green Bank, Pura, CTI, and especially Oni and Nick and the team at CTNext that you know well. Can you talk about the ecosystem, where you think the ecosystem is strong, where there might be gaps, where there might be low-hanging fruit, and how you want to think about it? Yeah,
well, first I'll comment on just how I think the ecosystem has evolved, and it'll dovetail on my earlier comments, which is, we as state actors, and I think as kind of contributors to the ecosystem broadly have generally focused on physical place as a mechanism for innovation. So this is, building startup space and co-working space, and oftentimes incubators or accelerators will have an attachment to a physical space. And look, I still think that matters. You need space, you need density for innovation to happen. You can't wave and just say, go innovate. You have to have the inputs fostered, and you have to have collaboration, ideation, the things that happen when people come together. That got interrupted by the pandemic. It made it much more difficult for people to get together. And then I think, as I said before, I think the pandemic redefined the concept of place. And so what I've seen in terms of how our ecosystem has evolved is we've started to see the formation of more formal and informal networks disassociated with any physical place. As I go around the state and speak, I end up meeting with these organizations that I didn't even know existed, quite honestly. That might be, it might be co-located around a certain region of the state. It might be sort of co-located around a certain industry. We see vertical networks forming. And I think that's really important, because if that is the direction we're going in, what that says is we need to reprioritize how we spend our time and our resources. Let's stop trying to go to places to create where entrepreneurs might come and create. Let's just go to where the entrepreneurs are. And I think that's a different change in mindset, but I think it's the right change in mindset. And actually, you mentioned CTNext. I think that is where their vision has changed over the last 5 years, and I think it's the right direction. Focusing more on entrepreneurial-led activity, let them lead the way, and then going and supporting. And where a state can be somewhat helpful and supportive is just around the connective tissue. I use this human anatomy analogy way too much, so forgive me. But I think of the concept of building an ecosystem as muscle building. It's a long-term exercise. It takes consistent applied leadership. But if you do it right, you end up with a risk-tolerant culture that will pay off generations for the public good. I consider that to be a public good. So the way you do that is you start to align those resources, and you play that concept of connective tissue. You can play, as a state actor, an organizing and catalyzing role, and I view that as very much part of my job description.
Radenka, you have said previously, thinking about the local ecosystem, which is what we're talking about primarily here today, but you've also said that climate change is a global problem, and therefore we need to have an international perspective. And how can the university kind of help foster that?
I think, climate change is a global problem, but politics are local. And when fire happens in Canada, it impacts the quality of life regardless where you are. So we have to innovate, and innovation is leveraging on anything that is happening in the world. So we have to partner with Japan, Korea, Israel, Canada, and say, where are you, and how do we advance together? Because investment in the innovation and technology deployment is huge. And for climate change, there are a few things. One is the new technologies and demonstration, deployment, and adoption of the new technologies. The another one is education. We do not educate enough workforce in academia these days to be ready for this climate change, starting from electrochemistry, corrosion, understanding the batteries, and we became accustomed to the quick solution. Give me quick solution, and there is no quick solution. There is a roadmap, and we have to look how the roadmap in US aligns with the roadmap in Japan, with the roadmap in Europe. What are the investments that we can leverage? What are the things that we can do together? Because for any country in particular, it's going to be very expensive. It's going to be small, incremental, and it will not yield the results. So there is going to be the period of transition that is going to be painful, but we are all going to experience that.
We're here now for the showcase for the companies in the second cohort, and one final question for both of you before we turn it over to Cody and the founders. Dan, this program to date has had a lot of kind of broad focus areas: adaptation, mitigation, energy, human factors, social factors. How do you think a program like this can best help kind of the efforts that you're leading to contribute to the innovation ecosystem, to entrepreneurialism? kind of the goals that you have set out, how can we support that through a program like this most effectively?
Yeah, if you think about what a program like this does, is it aggregates ideation, and that is an energy that I would love to export. So I think it's incredibly important that it's happening here. But what I would say to everyone involved is there is an ecosystem and a community here that would benefit from your energy. Actually, outside of climate change, which I, by the way, totally acknowledge needs focus, and I'm glad they're focused there. But really just thinking about it as you have a role to play not only in changing the world as it relates to climate change, but if you want it, you also have a role to play for others. Actually saying to others, I'm going through this journey and I would love to do it with you. I would love to actually talk about my challenges and see if I can help you solve yours. So there's sort of 4 themes that we're kind of spending time in and around as it relates to the innovation ecosystem. It's access to capital, it's access to talent, which is obviously a big part of higher ed. It's networks and networking, what I talked before about these formal and informal networks, but then it's also mentorship. How do you do what you do? And what I want people to hear as they ideate here is that there is a broader picture and a broader support network that you can both pull from and give back to. And by the way, again, I view my office's role as one of the important points of it as helping to have others see that, just see the resources that are available to them, and frankly also the broader ecosystem that's at work.
And so for UConn, we've worked together on developing the program up till now and the theme areas. Where would you like to see kind of a future cohort focus? Are there specific areas to go deep on, whether that's hydrogen, fuel cells, scope 3, quantum, AI?
I think we are going through the period of transition. So understanding what is that transition and how the startup and seed funding can work and leverage on the large companies, like wherever source wants to go, where big companies want to go, because that period of transition is instrumental. And we also have to look the circular economy. We have to look from where raw materials are coming, what is the cost of manufacturing, how we can apply it, how we can demonstrate to community, what are the policies that we work on, and then how we recycle. So and recycling is a very important component. Hydrogen is going to be around 20% of the solution. There is not going to be one solution. It's going the right solution at the right price for the right demography. And the solution in Canada with the hydropower is going to be different than the solution in Connecticut. But one important thing is educate the public. So whenever I say hydrogen, people say it will explode. So people don't understand the energy density. People don't understand that if you have collision with your hydrogen car, that the flame shoots up. It is the same like when the electrical car explodes and you have the firefighters with the hoses and water coming. You cannot distinguish that way. So as education and in universities, we should not miss an opportunity to educate consumers, public, and our students. And then we have to be more prone for technology deployment and demonstration to educate politicians and people who are decision makers when it comes to policy, to have experience, to have the platform where they can ask the questions and how we share information. So artificial intelligence and other things will help us to get there.
Well, thank you both for taking the time. We could go on for a while. We have barely even touched on how to partner with industry and other topics, but we're going to turn it over to Cody and the founders and hear what the companies have been doing for the last few months. So, round of applause, everyone, for thanks again for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you, Dr. Merrick. Thank you, Dan. I'm Cody Sims. I have had the pleasure for the last few months with this cohort and for the last year plus overall with the Future Climate Venture Studio as serving as the entrepreneur in residence. And so what that means largely is I've been working with the founders, meeting with them, understanding their challenges, the things they're working with. I've also been working with UConn and with RGA Ventures and the other partners in the early days of identifying the founders that we might want to bring into this program, identifying the companies that we might want to bring into this program. We've had, hundreds of companies put their hand up and say, I want to do this. And of course, we're down to 6 that are here that were ultimately selected and chosen to participate. You just heard Dr. Merrick say a really important part of the transition that we're in is communication and education. Outside of the work I've been doing with Future Climate Venture Studio, in my day job, quote unquote, I host a podcast that's quite popular in the climate space called My Climate Journey. We've done 400 plus episodes talking with founders, talking with policymakers, talking with heads of academic research labs, talking with capital deployers about climate. So if you want to dive deep on any topic, feel free to check out our archives and go there. I also run a venture capital firm called MCJ Collective. We have more than $100 million AUM. We've been investing in climate tech startups at the early stage now for about 4 years. So enough about me. We're here today to learn about these awesome companies and the diversity of solutions that you're about to see. Before we do that, I want to take a minute to acknowledge that we've also had 3 fellows from UConn that have been working with our founders. These are 3 PhD students in engineering and material science. We have Ala Salim, we have Amy Pollock, and we have Bouquet Sahin. If you could just take a minute to please give them a round of applause. Stand up, fellows, and wave. Stand, and wave. Thank you for your time and help. And if folks could come find them afterward and just learn a little bit about the projects they've been doing together with the startups, I'm sure they have a ton they can share with you. Okay. So with that, we're going to transition into hearing from the founders directly. What you're going to hear is a broad diversity of solutions. Everything from critical EV battery metals to carbon removal from the atmosphere to circular agriculture to accelerating EV adoption and EV infrastructure to helping with the tidal wave of home electrification rebates that are coming online and tax credits that are coming online, to insurance and risk as the world deals with the effect of climate change, even as these other solutions are doing their best to mitigate the problems that we are likely to face. It's very clear there's increased drought, there's increased flooding, there's increased wildfires, et cetera. So, both cause and effect are in the house today, so to speak. With that, I am going to welcome up our first founder. We have a founder building a company called Afterlife that is in circular agriculture, looking to help reduce the impact of food waste on emissions and create something very delicious in the process. Winston Wong, come on up.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Winston Wong. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Afterlife. And at Afterlife, we're building a network of circular farms that uses food waste that would otherwise go into landfills to grow local, sustainable, and fresh mushrooms for everyone, everywhere. So we all know that there's a terrible problem with food waste currently, and this problem continues to increase every year. Essentially, food waste is going into landfills, and we're wasting 35 million tons every year. And that creates like 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions that's being created as well. And we only have 3 million tons of processing capacity currently. So, a lot of the solutions currently with compost farming and digesters are great, but they usually take a while, and the solutions are pretty expensive as well. But there is one surprising and undervalued solution, which is fungi. So mycelium and fungi is actually one of the best natural decomposers in the world. It can break down food waste, clean up oil spills, even microplastics. And essentially, we are using that food waste as a medium to grow mushrooms. And mushrooms is actually one of the highly sought after ingredients currently, whether it's in food or supplements or anything else. That's what we're essentially doing and reclaiming. So we are the only farm currently that uses food waste to grow their mushrooms. And as part of our circular model, we currently generate value across every single part of our stage, which I'm going to share with you on how it all works. So this is, for example, one of our customers. They're Two Boots Pizza based in New York City. We work with all of their restaurants. We can currently work with anyone that generates food waste, whether it's a restaurant, grocery store, food distributor, schools, hospitals. Anyone that have food, we've been able to essentially take that waste, bring it to our compost farm, to our mushroom farm. We essentially get paid to process that waste. It's around $20 for around 80 pounds of waste. They pay us to collect it, to process it, and then essentially we take it to our farm to grow these mushrooms. In New York City, we have our current pilot farm up and running. We currently sell out 300 pounds of mushrooms every week over the last 6 months. You can see a variety of mushrooms that we're currently growing, and we're going to currently grow more with our proprietary formula. And huge thanks to Amy, who's our UConn fellow, who's been helping us thinking through how we can continue to use more food waste as well in our formula. So we're excited to grow more, and essentially the customers that essentially give us that food waste essentially also pays and buys our mushrooms back. It's around $6 to $15 per pound of mushrooms, depending on the strain that you're working with. And essentially with local mushrooms that we're currently growing, and I don't know how much you know, but essentially 65% of mushrooms are currently grown in Pennsylvania and shipped all across the country. With the local mushrooms that's fresher, that we deliver day off after harvesting at the same price, that's more sustainable, and providing them with very unique species that they're currently looking for, our customers are switching to us because it's a no-brainer. Our value proposition is much better than what they're currently getting. And with each pound of mushrooms that we grow, we're essentially saving 1 pound of food waste going into landfills as well. And we're excited to expand. So we're in the process of building and constructing our new farm. The new farm will be 10,000 square feet, where we'll be able to grow up to around 15,000 pounds a week of mushrooms, which means that it's 750,000 pounds of waste that's being reclaimed and upcycled every year. And we're also partnering with Cogent Waste Solutions, who is the second largest waste hauler in New York City. They're essentially going to provide us with endless amount of feedstock of organic waste. Plus, they have 10,000 clients that we can tap into and sell into. We also signed a partnership with Strager Provisions, one of the leading food distributors in New York as well, who is going to help us grow. We're excited to expand not only in New York City, but also into the national market as well. And the way we do that is essentially by building hundreds of farms all across the country. Because we're a highly capital efficient business, with just $1.5 million in CapEx and equipment and building the farm, we can generate around $3 million in yearly gross profit at a 60% margin. That means with every farm that we're building and growing every year, we can build another farm, allowing us to provide local and sustainable produce and mushrooms for everyone, while reducing food waste from going into landfills. And we're excited to see more things not going to waste as well. So currently a lot of spent mushroom substrate is being discarded and also thrown into landfills. With ours, because ours is generated through food waste, we turn it into a biochar, and it actually has a higher NPK value than traditional woody waste biochar. So that can be provided to farmers to continue to better retain water in their farms, and essentially grow even more sustainable produce. And we also taking whatever is left over that we can't sell and turning that into a mushroom extract. So we've successfully created powdered and tincture extracts. Mushroom extracts is a massive market and growing quite significantly. You can see here some of the brands are $100 million brands already, even in the past few years. And 90% of that extract currently comes from China. So we want to be able to build the largest domestic supplier of mushroom extracts and work with food companies everywhere to be able to create more products out of this. So mushrooms is a massive market. In the US alone, it's $5.3 billion. This is continuing to grow at around 9 to 10% CAGR every year, and we want to be able to capture this. This is all possible because of our team. Our team consists of people that are coming from mycology, indoor farming, startups, operations, and we're working with some really great climate and food VCs, including obviously the Future Climate Venture Studio. Thank you for having us. So we're excited to not let waste go to waste. So Connecticut, if you're interested in learning more about how we can do that together, I would love to chat with you. Thank you so much.
All right, Winston, say there. I have a couple questions for you. And first of all, I just want to say how much I love your branding. You guys have done such a good job with that. It's really cool. Okay, so the first question I have for you is, how is most specialty mushroom farming done today?
Yeah, currently most specialty farming, they're done pretty manually. They use predominantly grains and sawdust and soybean hulls to grow the mushrooms. So they need to buy that from other places, and then a lot of it is manually harvested, manually inoculated. So the difference between what we do is we use liquid fermentation as a way to inject into our substrate, which is the food waste substrate, and we automate a lot of the process, so it reduces our cost quite significantly as well, so that we can compete against some of the larger farmers that are doing more button mushrooms and crimini, all that stuff. Yeah.
And I guess on the other side of your sort of the ecosystem that you work in, how do restaurants today typically deal with the food waste that they have, and are they required to do something with it?
Yeah, currently. There are regulations around the country. There's 14 states currently that have composting regulations where you have to source separate. Unfortunately, because there's a lack of processing power in terms of composting in the country, they're required to separate it, but the waste haulers are not required to actually take it to a composting facility. So a lot of it still goes into landfills because of that. So the work is on the front, but on the back end, nothing changes. Yeah.
And then maybe explain a little bit more on, this being the Future Climate Venture Studio, from a climate and emissions perspective, what's the difference between food waste either going into a landfill or going into composting, which I think is better than a landfill, but
Yes.
that compared to using it to grow mushrooms and what happens. I assume the biochar use case that you shared has a little bit to do with that, but maybe unpack the emissions impact a little bit more.
100%. So as you may know, food waste or any organic waste going into landfills creates methane emissions, which is like 38 times more deadly than just general carbon dioxide. So that's obviously a lot worse in terms of creating greenhouse gas emissions. So with composting, it's great, but as I mentioned, composting takes a long time. It's very manual, and you have to manually cure it, etc. So with mushrooms, essentially the mycelium would sink the carbon in the root structure. It's a lot faster. The whole process takes a month or so, and then you're creating something of value that people actually want, that is the mushrooms itself. And then with biochar, essentially that sinks that. So what's left over is sunk even further, and biochar essentially sinks carbon for like 1,000 years. So that creates a lot of carbon credits, but also allow us to be able to provide that to farmers as well. Yeah.
Winston, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Great job. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Okay, who in the room currently, and it's okay, don't feel pressure to put your hand up, who in the room currently owns an EV? Okay, who in the room thinks they'll buy an EV within the next 5 years? Okay, good chunk of the room. Who feels like you have access to EV chargers whenever you would want it, based on where you live? Okay, there's maybe a little bit lack of EV chargers. Well, I'm not going to say anything more. I'm just going to welcome David Kim from Monterra on up here.
Awesome. Thank you, Cody. Hello, everyone. I'm David Kim. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Monterra, and we are accelerating the deployment of EV chargers, one charger at a time. So let's talk transportation, right? So transportation is one of the heaviest emitting sectors of the global economy, and electrifying it is key to decarbonizing it. And we're getting closer to an inflection point in the transition to EVs as well, as the hand showed. Right? In California, for example, EVs have gone from 2% of new car sales to 22% in the last 5 years. And the rest of the US is following a similar path soon. But to support all the EVs, the growing number of EVs in the future, we need to install a lot more EV chargers. To bring some numbers into this, we need 30 million more EV chargers in the US alone by 2030. And to put that number into context, we need to install 8 more chargers every minute between now and 2030 to hit that number. So all that said, we need to really get moving fast. But today, the process for really designing and quoting charger installation is way too slow and expensive. Right? Electrical contractors and project developers are relying on a lot of manual processes, which means multiple hours of desk work and administrative work just to design and quote a single site. So this is really leading to an inefficient lead to proposal cycle, hurting the contractors' bottom lines in this EV charging business, and also really stopping them from growing their EV charging businesses more aggressively. So what do we do about it? So at Monterra, we build software to help them plan, design, and sell projects a lot faster. So today, contractors use a combination of sketches made on Google Maps screenshots, really complicated Excel spreadsheets, and really phone calls and emails back and forth between the field team and the sales office to actually sell these sites. So what we have done is we have brought together all of these processes into one app, streamlined them so that we can help installers work faster and handle greater volume. So here's how this works. First, we have a mobile app that helps electricians in the field capture data a lot more efficiently. They can quickly catalog existing electrical infrastructure on site, take photos of the site and record different information, draw out the different conduit runs, and tag the location of the EV chargers that's going to be installed, et cetera. And all of that data is transferred from the field back into the home office in real time. Then we help contractors really design and quote sites in a matter of minutes. Using a combination of the data collected from the field and the satellite-based imagery, our contractor customers can really quickly put together a site map using our web app, and then auto-calculate the installation costs and the labor associated with the project. This is saving them hours and hours of time that they would be otherwise spending in really clunky spreadsheets that really break all the time, honestly. So from there, finally, we turn all that site design and the project quote into a fully formatted, customer-ready sales proposal with just a few clicks in our web app. So end-to-end, from data collection and the site survey to the proposal creation, a process that used to take installers more than 5 hours of manual work can now be done in less than an hour using with the help of Montera. So what does that mean? That means 80% reduction in the lead to proposal cycle time, 5 times the number of proposals that installers can put out with the same number of staff, and ultimately $500 of value to the contractor's bottom line per every site that they use Montera for. With that, so we launched our product 3 months into the market. We're working with 10 paying customers that have collectively added more than 200 EV charging sites using our app. And if we think about the long-term future of where we're going, the EV charging design and sales is only a starting point for us. The work of our contractor customers don't actually stop with selling the project. They have to go and design it, procure materials, construct them, and maintain them. So we really want to grow along the life cycle of the EV charging installation and support them with some of these downstream workflows. And after that, we want to expand into some of the other project types that our electrical contractors work on as well, and really evolve into the operating system that helps electricians and really transforms how they work fundamentally. And at Montera, we really believe that electricians and contractors are at the heart of building a cleaner, more reliable, and more efficient infrastructure for the coming decades. And we want to grow to become the most trusted name amongst them. So about the founding team, myself and my co-founder Kelson have a lot of experience in energy, infrastructure, and B2B software. I spent a lot of time working with utilities and renewable energy companies across the country with smart grid deployment, energy efficiency programs, EV charging program design, et cetera. And Kelson spent a lot of time working with big tech companies to build workflow and productivity software that's used by millions of users. So together at Montera, we're building a feature for a cleaner electrified future, and we're leading the charge one installation at a time. So if you're interested in learning more about Montera, please come up and talk to us. Thank you.
David, stay there. Great job. So help us understand, or help me understand a little bit, what a typical EV charger installer looks like as a business.
Yeah, so there's a range of installers actually ranging from very small businesses to larger businesses with a multi-state footprint, right? And I think for smaller businesses, they don't have the resources and the bandwidth to actually do all of these processes in an automated fashion. And then for some of the larger businesses, what they're struggling with is they have a lot of these salespeople and they want to operate more efficiently for more, obviously bottom line value, et cetera. And one of the things that we're proud of at Montera is the ability to support them, regardless of if they're small businesses or larger businesses that are, working in the EV charging space.
And you mentioned today, primarily they're doing this type of work just in their own Excel spreadsheets, sort of paper clipping this stuff together. Like, what have you learned from talking to some of these installers about the process that they go through right now?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that Kelson and I think about a lot is that we have a lot of respect for these electricians who have so much deep expertise in the electrical design, about the circuits and what needs to be installed. But the administrative and the desk work portion of it is not something that they want to do, and that's not something that they're necessarily good at, right? And I think if we can come in as a software solution to encode some of that expert knowledge into the app and help them do that in a more streamlined, faster way to get to a bigger business, more profitable business, I think that's something that we're super excited about.
And then lastly, you mentioned some are somewhat larger organizations that have a multi-state presence, and some are quite local and small. How do you reach them?
Yeah, I mean, like if you know of really good ways to reach all of them, I'm all ears. We're always trying to do that, but it's a mix of different methods, right? Some of it is honestly just picking up the phone and calling them, cold calling, cold emails, etc. But that's one. But a lot of times we meet them at different conferences and trade shows as well, right? Because they like to come to these trade shows to share different knowledges and know-how about the electrical trades, looking for solutions. So that's a good venue to meet them as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, David.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a good message. Dr. Merrick mentioned that where we're going right now with everything we're doing in climate is that it's a period of transition. It's not one where innovation is going to knock out a bunch of incumbents. It's one where entrepreneurs are working together with existing incumbents and existing solutions providers to help solve problems. And I think what Monterra is building is a great example of that, of helping to make life easier for these folks who are already out there doing the work. Next up, we're going to shift gears and we're going to talk less about the technologies that are driving sort of reduction in emissions or helping us move away from climate change. And we're talking about a company that is helping all of us deal with the realities of climate change. The fact that there are more disasters happening, the fact that the world is getting more challenged and is getting harder. And this founder in particular has a very personal story that was the impetus for him to start Raincoat. So Jonathan Gonzalez, come on up and tell us about it. Thank you.
Hey everyone, it's been my first time in UConn, so absolutely lovely campus. It's really an honor to be here with all of you. So I'm Jonathan, I'm one of the co-founders of Raincoat, and the reality is that it's no secret that the world is changing, especially with everything that you see in the news, from wildfires to hurricanes to floods to droughts, you kind of name it. And for us, it's really clear that better financial safety nets have to be built than what currently is there. Our mission is to leverage the power of science, data, and engineering to be able to provide financial protection to everyone on the planet. And when I say financial protection, a lot of you are probably thinking about insurance. And you're probably thinking about it not from necessarily the most positive light. It almost sometimes seems like everyone has some sort of a insurance horror story that they share. But imagine if that wasn't the case. Imagine if we lived in a world where after an experience, you got a text message saying, hey, I know that this happened. This is what I think you need. Here's money, no strings attached, no questions asked, and everything just worked kind of like magic. Kind of sounds like sci-fi, but the reality is that we're already doing this for tens of thousands of people all across the world right now. And our focus is to create fully automated climate insurance solutions and the infrastructure that powers them. We work with governments, nonprofits, insurance companies, and banks to be able to develop these products and then embed it in those channels and then support them so that they're a success. We started out in Puerto Rico just 3 years ago, and since then we've expanded worldwide. And going back to Puerto Rico, what really got this whole thing started and how an engineer gets into insurance was really summer of 2017. I moved to Puerto Rico to take care of my mother, who was very delicate at the time. A couple weeks later, I didn't expect it, but Hurricane Maria hit the island, and my biggest concern was really just if my mom was going to be okay or not. Unfortunately, she lived pretty deep in the island, so it took me 3 days to get to her. And while she was okay, her house wasn't. The ramp that she would rely on had been completely blown away, and there were all these issues that had to be fixed. So I very naively asked her if she had insurance. She said she did, and she gave me the insurance policy. It was the first time that I had ever seen an insurance policy. It was a 40-page monster. I didn't really understand much of what was written there, but I did kind of understand how to start the claims process, so that's what I did. But this is where we kind of have to adjust the timeline, because from the moment that I filed that claim to the moment that the adjuster came by, basically a year went by. And by the time the adjuster was there and they took the pictures and took the notes, I felt, okay, this is good, it's going to get resolved. We ended up waiting 6 more months after that, and our claim was denied. So we wait 18 months to get a big claim denied. And as you can imagine, this wasn't a positive experience for me. And the unfortunate reality was that this was actually not particularly uncommon. It didn't matter if we were looking at wildfires in California, typhoons in Japan, or flooding in Germany, you would actually see these stories repeat themselves over and over again. So the question was, why wasn't the industry building better products? What was actually missing? Well, the unfortunate truth is that building better products is actually really, really hard. For the first part, developing a fully automated insurance policy is actually really complicated. And how do you measure an event and detect its intensity is a big scientific hurdle. The second issue is that there's a lot of data available, but integrating all of that data into a usable product and model is actually really complicated and requires a lot of infrastructure. And then finally, automating all the aspects of an insurance policy given legacy systems requires a lot of software and a lot of integrations. But these are all software issues, and that's basically what we do. We develop highly scalable and embedded climate insurance products. They're fully white labeled and built in collaboration with channels, and then we provide the infrastructure for that to be a success. And in that sense, it's a very modular platform that allows us to work with a large diversity of different types of channels. For example, those channels usually fall into one of two big categories. They're either channels that are looking to expand revenue stream by offering new products. This is commonly what you find with an insurance company. But we also work with the other side of that equation, which are entities that are looking to provide protection, not necessary to sell, but to be able to actually offer it. So a couple examples of work that we've done. In Mexico, they don't really have the equivalent of FEMA, but the government really wanted to protect 200,000 small-scale farmers. And this was a case where there was a lot of complexity in developing a product that could work at that scale. And with a large consortium of really great companies, we were able to build a solution that now protects those farmers whenever there's a big catastrophic event in their region. In Colombia, the Banco Agrario of Colombia is the largest agricultural bank in the region. They issue billions of dollars of loans, and now farmers can get those loans protected when they go take them out. So now when there's a big drought, that insurance policy covers the loan, and the farmer doesn't have to pay it back, and it's a win-win for all the parties. And to kind of show you the full wide range, in my native Puerto Rico, Hyundai is one of the largest brands on the island. And instead of offering a rebate, they started to offer hurricane coverage to the sales of the cars. It's been a really successful program because if you live in Puerto Rico, you're thinking about hurricanes all the time, and it really resonates with consumers. And none of this would have been possible without an incredibly talented and technical team that includes both all of the data and science sides, but also really long-standing insurance expertise. And we're also backed by some really great investors in the space that understand it well. And fundamentally, we think that the automated transformation of insurance is inevitable, but that transformation takes a lot of software and a lot of development, and we see ourselves as one of the partners in helping that transition happen. Thank you.
So as I understand it, a big difference between Raincoat and a traditional insurance policy that someone may have is when an event happens, you don't have to have someone come out and assess your site and decide if the thing that happened on your property is considered to be damage or not. It's a much broader sort of everyone in the sort of general geographic region gets rewarded from a policy payout. Is that am I understanding correctly at a high level?
So that would be a good representation. It really depends on the specific deployment.
Okay.
We can get pretty precise. It all depends on what data is available.
Okay. And what is the role of a traditional adjuster? And with Raincoat, what do you not need that person to come out and adjust?
So insurance is pretty crazy when you really think about how it works. Essentially, you have people that build a risk model based on historical statistical data, but they don't really know what's actually going to happen once the event happens. So then once the event happens, they send a person out who's supposed to analyze the policy that the person has with the knowledge of the risk model that they built and essentially calibrate what the payout is going to be based on what they've figured out. In our case, all of that process gets eliminated because the model that you use to build your historical vision is also the model that you use to detect what's happening real time. Right? So to give you guys an example of, in the agricultural sense, we could detect, for example, loss yield instantly, right? Because we have all the variables that go into it, right? And we can determine that and then essentially execute a payment in a very fair and automated way without a human being having to go and analyze the variables that they're analyzing.
And then in terms of who is ultimately sponsoring these projects or helping, had a number of different examples, from farmers in Mexico to hurricane insurance in Puerto Rico, with different essentially backers or sponsors of the product. Who ultimately is responsible for the payout in the event that you need to pay out the policyholders?
Yeah, so basically what usually happens is that even currently, just in traditional insurance companies very often do not have that capital themselves. Even governments, they don't really have it sitting in a bank, but rather they tend to reinsure themselves with a much larger entity or shift it into capital markets. So then what we really do is we connect all the dots in between them so that where the origination of the money, which often is capital markets or a large reinsurer, that can get to the individual without that many hoops as it currently stands right now.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, our next presenter is recognizing that when it comes to carbon, we often talk about there's too much CO2 or carbon emissions in the atmosphere. But really, carbon is an element. It's going to exist. It's just a matter of right now, there's maybe too much up here, and in some cases, not enough down here. We talk about soil carbon, we talk about different use cases for carbon, but carbon is also can be a very valuable element in things like the EV battery supply chain. So with that, Makoto Air is going to talk about how he is pulling carbon from the air with homeostasis.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Makoto Air, co-founder and CEO of Homeostasis. We transform atmospheric CO2 into critical materials for our electrified world. So, talking about the climate crisis, this is something we're all fairly familiar with at this point. In order to meet IPCC objectives to avoid the 2 degrees Celsius anomaly, we need to pull 10 billion tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere every year by 2050. Now, to put that number in perspective, if you were to take all of the crude oil and natural gas that the world accesses each year and put that in a bucket, that bucket is 7 billion tons. So we have 2.5 decades to scale this massive, massive industry. We have a lot to do. Now, at the same time, the battery market is experiencing some critical carbon supply problems. Lithium-ion batteries are 25% graphite by mass, and graphite is just crystalline carbon. There is an 85% shortage of graphite, according to the IMF. Now, what's more, north of 90% of global production is based in China, and they recently placed some pretty severe export restrictions in retaliation to us doing some stuff with semiconductors. So the trade war is expanding. That is impacting our ability to produce batteries. Now, finally, synthetic graphite, which is really the good stuff, is made from fossil fuels, results in high emissions, and is just too expensive for battery manufacturers. It comes in at $10,000 per ton. So at Homeostasis, we're working to solve both problems at the same time by harnessing the graphite that we need from the sky. So our novel, innovative process pulls CO2 from the atmosphere and converts it into graphite. Since we're mining the skies, we have virtually limitless supply. We could produce this anywhere on Earth. And because we're electrifying the entire process, we can actually do this at half the current production cost. So it's a win-win-win there. Now, what you're seeing here is actual carbon, actual graphite that we've synthesized from the air using our mineralization and electrolysis tech stack. So we've built over 24 hardware variants. We've run over 75 tests across them. We build, test, and iterate rapidly. And that's exactly what the industry needs today. So how do we do this? Well, we remove CO2 from the atmosphere using water with salts, metal oxides dissolved in them, and this forms carbonates. In this case, we're showing barium carbonate. We pull that carbonate slurry that's containing the CO2 out of solution. We dry it out, we then melt it, and then we run electricity through that molten solution, producing carbon, which is our final product, oxygen, which is a waste product, and the salts that we use for additional CO2 removal. We rehydrate those salts and close the cycle. So it's a cyclic, two-step cyclic system. So now let's look at this tech at deployment scale. Large battery manufacturers like Panasonic will require that we produce roughly 10,000 tons of this material every year. So a homeostasis plant at this scale would be about 50% larger than your average Costco, about 200,000 square feet. Now, selling at half the market price, we'd be producing $50 million of revenue every year. The CapEx for this facility would be about $110 million, and the OpEx at roughly 25. So we would be able to break even on this project after about 4.5 years of operation. Now, all of this is without considering the effects of the IRA, right? So we've got 45X and 45Q tax credits that we qualify for here, as well as the sale of voluntary carbon credits. So the story can really only improve from here. Now, using a bottoms-up approach, the global market is growing into a $81 billion monster by 2030, with North America accounting for $12.4 billion of that market. Our customers are battery cell manufacturers with operations in North America, and there are 60 known projects that fit this criteria. Our objective is to have 10 full-size projects up and running by 2030, giving us a sum of $500 million. So there's clearly so much for us to grow into here, right? This is just the beginning. Now, conversations with customers have shown us that we can deliver what they need at a competitive advantage, right? So by, again, mining the skies for synthetic graphite, we're able to deliver a quality, cost-effective product at a reliability and sustainability profile that outpaces the competition. Now, my team and I come from worlds of doing very, very difficult things. We've got aerospace engineering, material science, climate policy all under our belts. We know how to tackle deep tech, and we have access to world-class engineers for when we scale. With DOE funding, we have started producing some test battery cells. We're really excited about this. This is to test the performance of our material, and we've been doing this at the Washington Clean Energy Test Beds over at the University of Washington. Now, these results will lead to LOIs, higher fidelity cells, so pouch cell tests, and unlock material transfer agreements with prospective customers. Now, all of this is in the name of getting to that first pilot. We plan to have this built and operated before the end of 2025. So with that, I would love to connect. We're looking for partners primarily in the battery cell manufacturing space and for investors who are passionate about enacting real-world change. I want to emphasize here, this is true disruption, right? We're taking the thing that is killing us and turning it into a critical part of the solution. This is absolutely revolutionary, and we hope you join us. Thank you.
Sure, go for it.
Okay. Just comment. This is
Yeah.
a great idea for carbon utilization, right?
Thank you.
CCUS, what people do. It's what you do. So, is it critical to use the CO2 you capture from the air or the CO2 from anywhere? Who gets it from power plant?
Yeah, so it can really come from any direction. The thing that we really want to see happen is carbon removal not just survive, but thrive. And our primary concern at the moment is that there needs to be a more robust business case. And we really feel that by coupling these two segments together, we're creating an avenue for carbon removal to really thrive. And there's also a positive side for the graphite end of things. This will allow us to really be anywhere, right? So rather than being forced to locate with a large emitter, we could be right next to the battery cell manufacturers, really collapsing the value chain, or excuse me, the supply chain to just being next door.
Yeah, it's because really you care about the capturing CO2 from the air, but we can then see the capture from power plants or chemical plants, and we worry about using that. So you connected with them through DOE or utilizing the CO2 capture from the industrial plants?
It could be a super interesting use case, especially if the economics of it work out. Yeah.
I love that. You know, one of the things we'll get a chance to do when we wrap here is for everybody to come talk to the founders. But that's a great example of when you have ideas and you have ways to be helpful to these founders. It's certainly gold. So thanks for the suggestion. I was going to actually dive into a little bit on the process side. So how you guys discovered this, you know, air to graphite process in the first place.
Yeah. So my background's mechanical engineering. I was in aerospace before this. I was really interested in life support systems, which has to do with pulling CO2 out of cabin air and replenishing oxygen supply. My co-founder, Julian Lombardi, sitting over there, has a PhD in chemistry. We've known each other for a long, long time, and we just love talking about technical concepts. We started looking at terrestrial applications for these CO2 removal systems. And quickly found that we're able to develop something that we could build on our own. So with things that we bought from Amazon and Home Depot, between our two apartments, we had a fully closed loop carbon removal system that was producing solid carbon. We wanted to get some of that electrochemical stuff outside of our apartments because that was a little bit dangerous, but it was great to arrive at that, and yeah, we knew we were onto something.
And you had the sort of pseudo competitor chart up there, and it looked like it was only homeostasis and then a partial checkbox on one other company that does in terms of an all electric solution to graphite production in particular.
Yep.
You mentioned earlier the other two solutions essentially are mining or synthetic production using fossil fuels. Would that be representative of who the other players were in that competitive space?
Yeah, so there are historically two main players. There's going to be natural graphite mined out of the ground that actually diminishes local air quality. Washington Post has a great article on this, on some of the things that are happening in China. Synthetic graphite is produced from fossil fuels. You burn it, you collect the soot, you compress that into a block, and you expose that block to 3,000 degrees Celsius for 15 days. It's a very energy intensive process, 27 megawatt hours per ton. Historically, those were the two ways that you produce graphite. There is this kind of electrochemical reduction process that's happening now. There are a few people who are moving in this space. We're excited to be one of them. The half check mark that you're seeing there is basically us looking into its competitive intelligence without being able to see fully into everything because everyone's holding their cards close to the chest. We're suspecting that they're also fully electric, but
Okay.
we're looking around.
And then the last question I have for you is just, you talked about that current graphite production into the U.S. import into the U.S. is mostly from China, and that there have been some export restrictions on China recently as retaliation for some of what is happening in the semiconductor space. What does that mean for this nascent battery industry that the U.S. is really trying to create right now?
Yeah, it's a huge deal. If you look at the grants that are coming out of not just the DOE but DOD, we're looking at a lot of support for onshoring critical material production. It's because of this stuff exactly. We are looking at an 18x growth of battery cell manufacturing on this continent between 2021 and 2030. Right, we're talking like massive explosion. It's like 30% compound annual growth rate. It's just crazy town, right? But this is announced projects, steel on the ground. These are things that are happening. That capacity is going to mean diddly squat if we can't access critical materials. So we need to onshore that production, and this is one of the steps to getting there.
Makoto, thanks so much for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks all.
All right, we have two more companies to go. This next one, you heard Dr. Merrick in her remarks earlier say that climate change is global and all politics is local. The famous Tip O'Neill saying. I think when it comes to tax credits and incentives, what we're seeing is the big levers are federal, but the implementation is local, which can make it really challenging to take these billions of dollars that the federal government has earmarked and actually get them in the hands of consumers, homeowners, and the contractors who are doing the work to actually electrify our future. Jeff Coleman from Eli is working to streamline this, and I can't wait for him to tell you more about it.
Thank you, Cody. Thanks for having us, FCVS, and the whole team. It's been a great experience. Who wants $1 trillion? Now I have your attention. Look under my chair. Look under your chair. Great. Hi, I'm Jeff Coleman. I'm the CEO at Eli. And some of the biggest barriers to consumer decarbonization are not very well known, and that's because they're annoying and unsexy things like lots of paperwork, complicated processes, confusing processes, payment delays, unreliable data, a lot of the boring stuff that software can actually be really good at solving. But the world needs to electrify fast, and we can't allow that to be delayed because of this kind of confusion and red tape. So at Eli, we're on a mission to make electrification accessible and affordable for everyone. We have a super unique approach in the industry. We're already at about $1 million in annual revenue. And we have a team that's been working on this for almost 5 years, so more than anybody else in the space. So we're ready to have a big impact in an $8 billion market, and I'm excited to share more about that. So affordability is really the main barrier for consumers to decarbonizing their lives. So these financial incentives, like the IRA, for example, are really our best policy lever for driving consumer decarbonization. And because of the IRA and all of these other state and local policy wins over the last few years, we're about to see billions and billions of dollars of new incentives across the US in the years ahead. So that sounds great, but there's bad news. And that is the frontline workers in electrification, the businesses, contractors, and installers who we need to actually do this work and access these dollars, face friction and financial burden in participating in these programs. For most of them right now, it's actually more profitable not to participate, and that's a huge problem because it's leading them to install more fossil fuel appliances every single day in all of our homes. So contractors understand that the electric future is coming, right? There's regulations that are forcing this in many places, and they know it's time to evolve or perish, but the barriers are really daunting. So these programs have complex eligibility rules that change all the time. They have even small contractors, mom and pop businesses, are hiring people just to process incentives, sitting in a back office, filling out forms, submitting them. If they get that far in the process, then they face weeks or in many cases months of delays in getting the money and are having to front money to their customers, which is not sustainable for these small businesses. And all of that might be okay if these incentives were helping them close more customers or bigger projects, but they're not because they don't have reliable data around incentives to share with their customers during the sales and marketing process. So that's where Eli comes in. So we are a turnkey solution for contractors and installers that eliminates the friction and financial burden of incentives and turns this uncertain future into a huge opportunity for them to grow their business. And we're the only company in this space that's tackling this problem at the source. So the incentive landscape is super complicated, right? You have governments that create the big pots of money for these programs that we've just seen with the IRA. Then you have these little-known organizations we call incentive program administrators, who are private companies that compete for contracts to run the incentive programs and stand up the systems and processes needed to run them. And these systems are broken, and in fact, these program administrators know it. So the program administrators aren't going anywhere. So at Eli, we've taken the approach similar to like a consumer banking product like Plaid, of building a completely new digital connective tissue, APIs and other digital infrastructure that solve key pain points for the program administrators themselves and give Eli privileged access to be able to automate and streamline incentive processing for contractors and ultimately consumers. So we give contractors and their customers essentially a universal application for incentives and rebates. It's a one-stop shop that consolidates all of the eligibility rules and all of the processes of applying and qualifying for incentives across all of these industries. This helps contractors compete and grow as these industries transform by helping them target better leads, by incorporating incentive data into their marketing and sales, to save a ton of time and money on that back office busy work, and ultimately to get paid as soon as possible rather than waiting weeks or months. And incentives are just the beginning for us. So across all of these industries, all of these installers, contractors, retailers need a solution for handling incentives now. But ultimately, to drive affordability for the long term, we need new financing products that we can combine with incentives to keep these products affordable for a long time. So we're focused on solving the incentive problem now, but we'll use that distribution and the digital infrastructure we're building to offer a new generation of loan products for consumers to keep these things affordable in the decades to come. So since raising our $2 million pre-seed about 7 months ago, led by Lower Carbon Capital, we have, as I said, hit a little over $1 million in annual revenue. We have secured partnerships with program administrators that run over 300 programs around the US, distributing billions of dollars in incentives. We've launched with contractors in California, doing more than $200 million of electrification installs per year. We're launching in New York and I hope Connecticut soon. So those of you in the government or utility sector who are around here, I'd love to talk to you. Yeah, we launched our APIs for program administrators over the summer this last year and have gotten a ton of traction there as well. As I said, we've been working on this for over 5 years. We started out building a similar solution for the state of California saw the IRA coming and realized this was going to be a huge problem. Our core team, again, has been together since then. We started Eli earlier this year and have added folks with a lot of experience in lending and fintech, as well as government and other incentive programs. So if you want to talk about getting your hands on that $1 trillion, come talk to me after. Thank you.
Hey, Jeff, stay up here, man.
I forgot about you. Sorry.
All right.
We've been talking so much.
Tell us about the experience of a homeowner today. If you are installing a new heat pump or installing a new heat pump water heater or whatever it may be, how do you typically unlock these incentives for your project?
Yeah, so the sad answer is you don't if you're typical. You said typical consumer. So many of us in this room, certainly Cody and I, have done all the Googling and figured out, how can I get incentives for my heat pump?
You just called me a nerd.
I'm sorry, you are. So it's an arduous journey, and actually, I've sat on panels talking about this stuff. I'm supposedly an expert. When I electrified my house a year ago, I could barely figure it out. So it's hard, even for folks like us. But for most people, the actual decarbonization experience goes like this. Oh shoot, my heater's broken. It's freezing in my house. What am I going to do? I'm going to call someone who can fix my heater. And right now, your chances of connecting with someone who understands these programs, knows about them, and will educate you about them are basically zero in most parts of the country, right? So that's why we're focused on contractors and installers as kind of the key fulcrum of making this change happen.
When my own water heater went out about 2 years ago, and I knew I wanted to get a heat pump, but I couldn't find someone to install it in Los Angeles, my wife was about to kill me when it took a week to get our hot water heater installed back into our house. So I hear what you're saying. And then on the flip side, with the contractors, what is their process? You mentioned, some financing solutions that you're thinking about working on in the future. Are these often small businesses actually having to float these rebates to the homeowners and consumers right now?
Yeah, it's a huge problem, especially neighboring New York has a history of this being a big problem. So basically, the programs require the contractors to pass all of the savings on to the consumer. So $7,000, you have to take that off of the cost of the project for the consumer and make that transparent for them. But then they take 8, 12, or 20 weeks to actually pay the contractor. So that contractor is basically making an interest-free loan to the consumer. And this wasn't a huge problem 5 or 6 years ago when an average contractor was doing 1 heat pump out of every 50 installations that they're doing. But these programs, the IRA, for example, are going to be forcing contractors to do half of their projects as heat pumps and hopefully 100%. And there's absolutely no way they can float that kind of money.
When we did our own home HVAC heat pump, our contractor was quite literally Venmoing me our rebate $1,000 at a time. Like that's how we got our.
Oh, I'm gonna take that one. I haven't actually heard that anecdote yet.
So there's clearly a problem. And then last question I have for you is, as a business, you just, there's now this incredible amount of money, but it's flowing down to all these different localities, all of which have these different program administrators, and it feels, fragmented. And yet, for you to solve the problem, do you need to take a 50-state strategy? Like, are you going all fronts at once? Like, what does that look like for you and your team?
Yeah. So big strategy for us is channel partnerships. So on the program administrator side of things, that means we focus on building partnerships with these private companies that essentially their business is going around all over the country and getting these contracts. And so, we have one partner, for example, that runs like 240 programs throughout the US. They run some of the biggest statewide programs in California. So once we've set up that partnership, we then are kind of getting that access to tons of programs. We can get 80% of the programs in the country with less than 10 partners on that front. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
Cool. Thanks, Cody. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, our final startup for today is led by an entrepreneur who has spent her career in the insurance industry, and she is now building a company called RIC to help the world deal with the increased amount of flooding and risk that we're all facing because of climate change, and rethinking how insurance products need to be built as part of doing so. Nikita Devlin from RIC, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Nikita Devlin, CEO and founder of RIC. At RIC, we're committed to helping those who are most at risk from natural disasters gain resiliency and peace of mind through our technology platform and solutions. Each year, we're feeling the effects of climate change more and more, and the most prevalent natural disaster most of us will face is flooding. In the US, 99% of counties have experienced severe flooding in the last 2 decades. These effects of floods are damaging across the whole community, but the risk is not felt equally. The less money you have or the smaller your business is, the more vulnerable you are to the effects. The vast majority of US businesses are small, and after a flood, a quarter of them will fail in the year. This is devastating to those businesses and to the workers who depend on those jobs. In fact, 95% of Americans do not have flood insurance, even though many want the protection. In catastrophe-prone areas, private insurance companies are leaving altogether. Those that do have coverage deal with claims that take months to close and limits on what the funds can be used for. And just to be clear, the insurance gap is not a problem for some. This affects all of us. FEMA, the federal government, is now the largest insurer against floods. And when FEMA goes broke, which it has many times before, it's us, the taxpayers, who foot the bill. We've discussed the challenges, but now let's shift our focus to the opportunities. Even small steps can lead to significant positive outcomes. A 1% increase in the number of people insured against climate disasters can result in a 22% reduction in post-disaster costs for taxpayers and governments. Spending a decade plus in the insurance industry, I've witnessed the lack of investment in research and development to tackle climate issues. This gap in R&D represents an opening for innovative startups to make a significant and far-reaching impact. So what would it mean to build a more resilient community? One where each person can afford protection from disasters? That's what we're focusing on at RIC. We've created a micro flood policy that just about anyone can afford. The cost is $14 a month for everyone. In the event of a rainfall flood, RIC pays out $10,000 with funds delivered within 48 hours. Remember when I said that 95% of Americans don't have flood insurance? Well, 84% of recent flooding has happened outside of flood zones. So you're flooding and then learning you were at risk. Said more plainly, most Americans who experience flood will get nothing, nada, zero help. Imagine what that feels like. $10,000 in coverage, while it might not appear like a lot, is going to be a lifeline for those families and businesses who are going through their toughest times. We don't require a lengthy application. In fact, all we use to generate a policy specifically tailored to each individual is the customer's address. Our data-driven digital platform models the level of risk for any household or business and assigns a specific trigger point. In the event of a major storm, if that amount of rainfall is hit, the policy automatically pays out. Our work is powered by the RIC Insurance Engine. This allows us to rate and model risk, manage accumulation, and complete the insurance transaction process. Our engine powers our flexible distribution. I sold insurance policies for many years and saw firsthand how limited the industry's distribution capabilities are and how it impacts product scalability. We offer our total platform integrated into Shopify, which allows us to reach a huge variety of web and social channels. Our service can be accessed via API, meaning we can work with insurance companies and brokerages. We're partnering with entire communities and municipalities in an embedded model. In practical terms, that means we're reaching people in novel ways. If a customer is looking for a generator after a storm, adding flood protection for a nominal upcharge is very appealing. Our community embedded model will be piloted this upcoming February in Virginia. After winning the Rise of Resilience Challenge this year, we're excited to work with the City of Norfolk to create an implementation of RIC rainfall protection into their community. In other words, the municipality is working with us to purchase our product on behalf of all of the residents living in the community. My co-founder and I have spent decades working in the insurance industry. Starting on opposite sides, I was selling insurance and he was the one crafting the policies. We met when we were recruited to be part of a founding team at a Willis Towers Watson-backed startup. Willis Towers Watson, they're a $9 billion global company, if anyone's heard of them. And let's just say their vision of innovation was a little incremental and a little too slow for us, so we left and founded RIC. We realized we had the passion and the know-how to build and deliver new catastrophe insurance solutions. The roadmap for RIC is to pilot our rainfall product and work towards developing other microparametric products such as wind speed, wildfire, and earthquake. Thank you for taking the time to hear me today, and thank you for UConn for hosting us. So if you are part of the insurance community or part of the government, I would love to talk to you. Thank you again.
Good job, Nikita. Thank you. All right, so the first question I have for you is, we see these images on the news of, of horrible flood and water up to the second story of a house, or a car with, water up over the wheels up to the engine almost. Those are obviously quite extreme examples. What are the typical types of events that happen in a flood that people experience all the time and maybe don't talk about or think about?
Sure, so I think like I said, 5% of Americans are insured for flood. So the people who are a lot of people are experiencing flood, but not a lot of people are experiencing flood insurance because they just don't have it. But if you do have flood insurance, it's often also the first time that you're finding out that there's no coverage for anything in your basement, which seems a little confusing because your basement is part of your home. But the federal, most people buy flood insurance from the NFIP, and the NFIP excludes basements. It also excludes any costs for your stays at hotels. So that's a huge cost for families when they're experiencing flood. So 1 inch of floodwater can cost you around $26,000 of damage. So it doesn't really take a lot to really have a major impact financially on a household.
And then you mentioned in your presentation that a 1% increase in policy coverage can reduce financial impact to governments and taxpayers by 22%. And then you later on showed your first pilot is together with the municipal government of Norfolk, Virginia. How do these municipalities, how are they starting to think about this? And is this something they're proactively going out and looking for solutions for?
Sure, so I just want to frame this as RIC. Ultimately, our funding for our pilot is coming from HUD because the community held a challenge to figure out ways to lower their flood insurance premium. So the federal government is also funding some of this work. We originally applied with a direct-to-consumer product. In speaking with the challenge runners and the local government there, they said, we don't really want that. We actually want to see if we can work with you to help implement this product into our community. So I would love to take credit for being some of the rallying cry to bringing governments to the table, but really the demand is so high for flood insurance in America, or just catastrophe insurance in general, that municipalities are bubbling it up and they have their hands raised and they're looking for solutions. So that's how it's a little organic, but it's coming from the municipality.
That's great. I mean, they're the ones whose citizens are feeling the impact directly, right? Well, Nikita, thank you so much. I appreciate all that you're doing, and thanks for sharing RIC with us.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
All right, that wraps up our presentations. But I want to emphasize one thing with everybody, which is being a founder is really hard. I've spent the last couple months working with these founders. I've spent decades working with founders in general. I can tell you these 6 CEOs in the room in the last few weeks have talked to me about hiring challenges that they're having, how they're trying to figure out how to expand their team or in what order they should hire people. They're talking about fundraising. We have multiple founders in the room who either are currently or are soon to be raising their next round of funding. Some of them, on the small amount, some of them in the multi-million-dollar raise amount. We have founders who are coming to realize that, boy, when I'm building this business, if I don't I'm on a small team. If I don't do this today, it's just not getting done. There's no one else. This is not a big company where, someone else will get to it eventually. Like, it's on them. And I've talked to founders who are, navigating partnerships, looking for technical validation, looking for all sorts of things, of the folks in this room. And so my ask of all of you is, it's one thing to show up and be inspired and see these incredible visions of the future and think to yourself, wow, I'm so happy there are entrepreneurs that are building this stuff. The world is going to be a better place. But the reality of it is, these folks are going to leave here today and they're going to go back and they are going to grind. And it is a hard grind, and it requires work, and it requires help. And, you know, if these businesses are successful, they're going to be grinding on them for 5 or 10 or more years to realize the ultimate visions that we heard today. And so my ask of all of you is, think about the relationships you have. It could be you yourself, or it could be a friend of yours. It could be a colleague of yours. But as you talk to the founders, learn from them where they need help. Do they need relationship help? Do they need access to capital? Do they need hiring support? And think about the specific ways you could lean in and try to be useful to them, because, boy, if we all chip in and help, that can make a meaningful difference. And, you know, and then recognize when you go home tonight, they're going home too, and they're going to keep on working to make these things happen. You know, we're talking about resilience in the face of climate change. These founders are resilient in the face of so much adversity, just trying to make this stuff go. And so with that, I want to welcome Abhijit Banerjee up here. Jit is the Associate Vice President of Innovation and Entrepreneurship here at UConn and has been a critical partner for this. And he is here helping to turn UConn's resources into ones that can provide more support and resilience and help to founders. Thanks for your sponsorship of the program and for all the partnership you've brought, Jit.
Thanks, Cody. My job is to sum all this up. And I think Cody already has done a fantastic job of summing it up. So one thing that I wanted to bring up, which is not thought of too often, and I did not see this come up in either the first cohort or the second cohort. So I was in a conference in Rome last month, and there were a number of European organizations who were talking about climate change, number of companies from the US, all everything. Then on the second day, a young woman stood up. She is from the UK, but she lives in British Virgin Island. And first thing she said is, how does it feel to lose all your family and your friends overnight due to a climate change? The British Virgin Island was impacted by the hurricane. And overnight, she lost her family and her friends who were impacted. So what she brought up was a very important thing, which is the mental health. When people go through this climate change, the crisis that we see, it's just not the flood insurance. It's just not, am I going to get the money to pay for my hotel bills, or can I rebuild my house? The emotional impact is not thought of. So while we conclude this second cohort, I urge everyone here to kind of start thinking how the people, our friends, neighbors who are impacted by the climate change are actually feeling about it. We don't talk about it. So with that note, I would like to thank my good friends at RGA Ventures, with Stephen and the team. This has been an incredible journey, and we would like to continue doing it. Our friends at the Connecticut Innovations, they're here. Thank you for your support. Our partners at Connecticut CTNext, Oni Ubiocho, without whom I don't think we could have done this program. He was instrumental in supporting, providing the assistance, funding, and everything. Our friends at Pura, Connecticut Green Bank. So, and most of all, our president, Rudenka Marek. When Stephen and I thought about this whole concept and idea, and we took it to our president, she was the VP Art then, she said, go ahead, don't worry about the money, we will figure out something. And that led to what we have today. The impact of startups, the impact, what you see today, the grind is there. But these young people are showing us that it can be done. That's the most important thing. So with that, please join us for lunch. And thank you again for your coming today. And thank you again for your participation.